Lando Norris just won his first Formula One World Championship, but he might lose it tonight. Brand new footage has just surfaced showing a possible illegal move at over 280 km per hour. The FIA has officially launched a last-minute investigation, and if Norris is penalized, Max Verstappen becomes world champion again. This could be the first time in history a title changes hands after the champagne. Before we reveal the full footage breakdown, subscribe now because this is the kind of story Formula One doesn't want you to hear. The final race of the 2025 Formula One season had already delivered one of the tightest and most mentally draining championship showdowns in recent memory. Lando Norris, racing for McLaren, crossed the finish line in third position at Yas Marina and became world champion by just 2 points over Max Verstappen. It was a historic moment. Not just for Norris, but for McLaren, ending a title drought that had lasted since 2008. The team erupted with emotion. The garage was a storm of hugs, tears, and radio messages filled with disbelief. No one knew what was coming next. The moment they had waited nearly 2 decades for was about to be shadowed by a plot twist no one saw coming. Just hours after the podium ceremony, deep within the FIA's data center, an onboard camera feed surfaced that had not been included in the live broadcast. The footage came from Yuki Tsunoda's car. He had finished outside the points and had not drawn major attention during the race. But this specific clip, taken from lap 27, showed a defensive move from Lando Norris at turn 9 that immediately raised alarm bells among the FIA stewards. As Tsunoda made an attempt on the inside, Norris adjusted his line aggressively. The angle of that move and the reaction it caused are now under forensic analysis. What looked like a routine corner on Sunday could be reclassified as a breach of the regulations by Monday. The regulation in question is Article 37.5 of the FIA Sporting Code. It dictates that drivers must leave at least one car width of space when defending a position if another car is already alongside. The moment captured on video shows Norris closing down that space rapidly. Tsunoda's onboard shows a violent correction in his steering as he tries to avoid contact. No touch occurred, but the maneuver forced him wide and off the ideal racing line. The championship was in play at that exact moment. If the incident had gone wrong, if the cars had touched, Norris's race and title would have ended in an instant. That context is now everything. Initial analysis of the incident did not flag it as critical. The race control booth had no protest from AlphaTauri, and McLaren certainly did not expect any issues. However, what changed everything was the release of a third-party breakdown on social media. A former data engineer uploaded a frame-by-frame angle reconstruction using Tsunoda's onboard, GPS tracking, and AI-driven path modeling. It demonstrated that Norris may have left less than the legal width, precisely 18 centimeters too little, according to that analysis. Red Bull saw the clip. They contacted the FIA. And within hours, what was a post-race celebration turned into an emergency review. The impact of this is seismic. If the FIA determines that the maneuver violated the rules, Norris could face a time penalty. Even a minor one, for example, 5 seconds would have dropped him to 4th place behind Charles Leclerc, who finished just 3 seconds behind him. That simple recalculation would flip the championship standings. Max Verstappen, who won the race, would reclaim the crown by 1 point. It would be the first time in modern Formula One history that a world title changes hands after the final flag based on new footage. And it would ignite debates that echo every bit as loudly as the controversy of Abu Dhabi 2021. In the McLaren camp, silence has become the default response. Lando Norris has not made public statements about the footage. Team principal Andrea Stella gave a firm but cautious reply, saying they trust their driver and that any defensive move should be reviewed in context. Meanwhile, Tsunoda told Japanese media that he was pushed off and that the maneuver did not reflect the sportsmanship expected from a world champion. The paddock, which had gone to sleep in celebration mode, woke up to murmurs, accusations, and press briefings filled with subtext. The story had officially grown teeth. This was no longer just a race review. It was now a potential scandal. For fans watching live, the moment in turn 9 barely registered. It was one of many micro-battles that unfold during a chaotic Grand Prix. But in hindsight, with new angles and data, it has become a turning point. How many championships are decided not just by speed, but by interpretation? By centimeters of space and fractions of steering input? This is what makes Formula One as much about rulebooks as it is about raw pace. It is not enough to cross the finish line first. In this era, you also have to pass the judgment of camera angles, AI-enhanced analysis, and post-race protocol. This is only the beginning. The FIA has 48 hours to complete its review. Red Bull's legal team is already preparing documentation in case they need to file a protest. McLaren are briefing their media advisors and instructing team members not to comment further. Fans are split in opinion. The footage continues to circulate, each replay drawing new theories, new judgments. And through it all, one question lingers with increasing intensity. Will the title stand? Or are we witnessing the most dramatic reversal in championship history? The footage that set everything in motion was not part of the live world feed. It came from an onboard camera mounted on the rear left side of Yuki Tsunoda's car, facing backward. Captured during lap 27 of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, this perspective had not been broadcast on television or analyzed in the post-race debriefs. It remained buried in the FIA's data archive until Sunday night, when a third-party analyst, using access granted through the technical media program, flagged it. The analyst, known in the paddock for prior contributions to driver coaching simulations, noticed an aggressive steering correction from Tsunoda mid-corner and decided to dig deeper. When the full lap was reconstructed using synchronized GPS data and sector timing overlays, a clear moment of conflict appeared in turn 9. This is a left-hand corner approached after a long DRS straight, where drivers reach speeds over 280 km per hour before braking hard. Tsunoda had a strong run out of turn 8, activated DRS, and dived down the inside line. Norris, defending position, made a single reactive move just before turn in. The McLaren shifted slightly left, narrowing the gap. What had looked like a clean defense in real time now carried the shadow of ambiguity. The question was no longer whether Norris defended, but whether he did so within the rulebook. The critical regulation, Article 37.5 of the FIA Sporting Code, is clear: a driver may defend his position, but any change of direction must not result in another driver being forced off the track. The stewards typically interpret this as needing to leave a car's width if the attacking driver has significant overlap. Using onboard telemetry and the overlay from Tsunoda's car, there was visible front wing overlap before Norris made the directional change. The timing was razor-thin. Tsunoda reacted, lifted slightly, and had to correct mid-corner. He stayed on track, but the moment cost him several tenths of a second and potentially his race rhythm. On paper, it could be seen as forcing a driver off the ideal racing line if not off the track entirely. From the technical data perspective, the measurements are compelling. The third-party analysis used FIA telemetry logs and open-source AI tools to estimate spatial separation between the cars at the point of conflict. It concluded that Norris's move left Tsunoda with a margin of just 48 centimeters, well below the regulation standard of 75. Adjusted for lateral motion and car width, the final estimated legal gap was short by 18 centimeters. That margin might not sound like much, but in Formula 1, 18 centimeters at full speed is the difference between a clean corner and a steward summons. Once Red Bull reviewed the breakdown, they filed an official complaint citing not just the footage, but the supporting technical reconstruction. Adding more weight to the controversy, Max Verstappen's onboard shows the same incident from several car lengths back. His point of view, though more distant, confirms that Tsunoda had full commitment into turn 9 and was clearly gaining before the defensive move. Verstappen did not comment publicly on the matter, but Red Bull's engineering staff provided the FIA with comparative steering telemetry from similar scenarios earlier in the race, aiming to show that Norris's reaction was unusually aggressive. McLaren, in response, submitted their own data, arguing that Norris had made a single move and that Tsunoda was never fully alongside. But the analytics battle had already begun, and the context surrounding that one corner now outweighs much of what followed in the final laps. There is also an operational angle to consider. At that point in the race, McLaren had no margin for error. Norris was under threat from both Ferrari cars, with Leclerc just 2 seconds behind and applying pressure on every lap. McLaren's race engineers had instructed Norris to prioritize tire management, knowing that defending too hard could overheat the rear axle and compromise his stint. However, turn 9 was one of the few zones where time could be lost if an overtake occurred. Losing that position to Tsunoda might have opened the door for Ferrari and the entire championship. The defensive move, then, was not just about one car. It was about holding the line under maximum pressure, when every second mattered. This, ultimately, is the core of the argument. Was Lando Norris's move in turn 9 a calculated act of championship defense, within the accepted norms of Grand Prix driving? Or did it cross the line into an unsporting maneuver, one that denied another driver a fair chance and potentially breached the FIA's code? That is the balance the stewards now must strike. And with the World Championship on the line, the implications stretch far beyond what happens on the track. This is no longer a debate about centimeters. It is a judgment on the spirit of racing itself. Because if intent becomes the deciding factor, then the next question is even harder to answer. What was going through Norris's mind in that corner? That leads us directly into the next block, where we analyze the technical limitations of the McLaren MCL39 and whether those limitations explain what happened in Turn 9. Turn 9 at Yas Marina may not be the most iconic corner in the calendar, but in this case, it became the flashpoint of a championship. After a DRS straight and hard braking zone, it invites overtaking attempts down the inside. But the corner tightens just enough to create ambiguity, especially when two drivers arrive side by side at over 250 km per hour. In this incident, Tsunoda used a strong DRS toe to launch down the left. Norris, having received no direct warning from his mirrors, veered left under braking. That shift is now under scrutiny. Was it a natural racing line adjustment, or was it a calculated block that failed to leave racing room? The FIA's regulations leave some room for interpretation, but one aspect is clear: any defensive maneuver must be made once, and it must not force another driver off track if they've achieved significant overlap. To determine whether Tsunoda had such overlap, stewards are now comparing throttle traces, GPS positioning, and steering angles. Preliminary data shows that Tsunoda had at least 35% of his car alongside Norris at the moment the McLaren changed trajectory. That is often enough to trigger the requirement to leave a car's width. What muddies the situation further is the point of commitment: both cars were under braking, and both had to adjust mid-corner, compressing the available space even more. Then there's the McLaren's visibility issue. The MCL39, like several cars on the 2025 grid, was built around a high rake aero philosophy, meaning the rear sits higher than the front, increasing airflow under the floor. While effective aerodynamically, this configuration creates notorious rear visibility blind spots, especially in left-hand corners. Drivers rely heavily on side mirror placement and rear-facing cameras, but in this case, the footage suggests Norris may not have seen Tsunoda until the very last moment. Does that excuse the move? Not necessarily. Under FIA regulation, the driver is responsible for spatial awareness, even if visibility is compromised by design. That, ironically, becomes a point of blame against the team itself, not just the driver. Adding to the complexity is the fact that Norris's steering input into Turn 9 was sharper than usual. Analysts compared it to his previous defensive entries from laps 16 and 22. In both of those, Norris defended the inside line with a more progressive curve, allowing rivals to remain on a parallel path. But lap 27 shows a sudden steering angle increase, captured not only in Norris's telemetry but also in Oscar Piastri's onboard, who followed both cars from P2. That rear-facing angle shows a rapid lateral movement from the McLaren that startled Tsunoda into correction. The chain reaction happened in under 1 second. That's all it took for an overtake opportunity to turn into a regulatory review.